Hello and welcome to the Everything is Black and White podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Musgrove, joined by our NUFC writer, Kieran Kelly. And we're going to discuss the breaking news in the last hour or so that Kieran Trippier has suffered what the club say is a fracture to the fifth metatarsal bone in his left foot. Put simply, his foot's a bit knackered. And he will be out, again, the club have said, for up and coming fixtures. There's no time scale on the games he'll miss, Kieran, but we all know from pure experience that players who suffer metatarsal injuries, it's not a quick recovery. Just give us your initial thoughts of the news on Kieran Trippier.
Yeah, I imagine for a lot of English people, it's bringing back memories of Wayne Rooney and David Beckham. It was like the most common injury for so long, a crisis moments for the England national team. But yeah, no, I'm sure every Newcastle fans felt the same in terms of just a massive blow. It's not only what Kieran Trippier can do with the ball, it's what he's brought to the whole club as a whole. It's felt like he's been there for years, let alone, I think, 6 weeks now, if even. It's really been a remarkable immediate impact. We all remember people like Papi Cisse when they came in as a mid-season signing. You could judge him on the goals. It was amazing what he did, but with Trippier, it's just been so much more. He's a leader, he's an organizer, he's vocal, and he's raised standards there. There's no doubt, and he already commanded so much respect as an England international. It's so long since Newcastle signed a player like that, but I think a lot of the players have looked at him, seen how he handles himself, seen how he's trained, and they've thought, wow, that's what I aspire to be as well. And I think that is what makes me most concerned, maybe, is that, yeah, he scored free kicks lately, he defends well, he gives them so much with his crosses and set pieces, but it's that mentality, that kind of cool head, that composure he brings to the team has been invaluable, and in my opinion has helped them earn points. You look at the record before he came and compare it to since he's come, it's not a coincidence. But I always have to stress he's just one player. He's a huge player. They have to adapt. When Callum Wilson got injured, they'll have to adapt again with Trippier going. And you'd like to think the impact he's made, that there are leaders in that team who can carry it on.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And you imagine he'll be in the background as well, still barking out orders and encouraging the players. But for me, it's that organisation that he brings to the side that Newcastle are really going to miss. And we saw it yesterday, in my view, when Kraft came on and Paul Dummett had to come on for Manquillo as well, that the defence, in my opinion, just lost a little bit of shape, and there was more space for Aston Villa's wide men to get in down the flank. Whereas, when Kieran Trippier was on, there was just a bit more balance, I thought. So it's going to be a real test for them to keep that shape in the games coming up, because you look at the next game against, I think it's West Ham, and they've got some excellent players which will attack them flanks. And it's going to be interesting to see who replaces him, because we're waiting on news on Javier Manquillo, who went off injured as well. If he has suffered ligament damage, as Eddie Howe suggested he may have done in the post-match interviews, then you think it would be Emil Kraft, and it's going to be a big test for him to step up and replace Trippier.
Yeah, I think you saw when he came on, I think it was his first game since maybe the Cambridge game, and what a situation to be parachuted into. It's not easy. I know he's a professional footballer, but for me, he's looked at his best when he's played at right-sided centre-back in a back five. I think as a right-back, he's not always been great, which is ironic because he's their only natural fit recognised right-back at the moment, and he's a Sweden international. But just think back to maybe that Arsenal game in November when he played at right back, and we saw some of those instances where he's playing people on, and it's such a fast game, and maybe he's sometimes exposed a little bit. Whereas at centre half, I think in a back five, he's done okay. But with the run of games, who knows? I think you've seen a lot of players under Howe who were maybe struggling under Steve Bruce who've come alive again. Fabian Schär, prime example. Look at Joe Willock recently. There are players in there who he's really got more out of, as much as the new signs have helped. So I think Kraft, certainly, that could be an example of someone who, Howe would really look to get more out of. And to put into perspective, we don't know how long Trippier is going to be out for, but it's expected he'll play again this season. It may not be that many games we're talking here. His impact has already been huge in the games in the last few weeks that have helped Newcastle claim so many precious points. So it is just one position. The back four as a whole, in my opinion, is much better. You look at the impact Matt Targett made on his debut, Dan Burn on his debut. Lascelles has looked better. Cher, as I mentioned, has been really good. And even Dubravka, he's not much to do, but he's looked a lot better in recent weeks after having a few hairy moments. So I think the overall defensive structure is better. The midfield's protecting them better. That, if there has to be a change like this, they might be able to cope, but it's still a huge loss, obviously.
How do you think Eddie Howe will be looking at it? He can only really probably look at it one way. He's not going to be available for however many games, and we've just got to get on with it. We have options there, and yes, no disrespect to the players we've mentioned, they're not in the same league as Trippier, but they're still Premier League footballers, and it's now up to them to prove that they deserve to be part of this first team selection.
Yeah, exactly. That's it. When a player's injured, there's no point, pining after them. They're out. You've got to move on to in the short term. And I think the biggest call for him really, once they know whether Manquillo is out, is whether he go to a back five. Obviously, they ended the game with the back five. They closed it out. They looked relatively solid. Whether he does that, but that might come at a cost then that one of your midfielders has to drop out and could disrupt the shape of the team, because it wasn't so long ago we wondered whether Newcastle can play with a back four. They clearly can now. They're actually looking really solid out of possession while also carrying a threat. Which is the age-old balance we've been searching for probably years now. So do you disrupt the whole team by changing the shape again? Put Ryan Fraser, say, at right wing back. It's a really big call for that West Ham game. So that's probably his biggest decision to make, whether, as we touched on, you go with someone like Emil Kraft, or you accommodate Byrne, Lascelles, and Cher to play Fraser at wing back, which would be interesting.
I feel Kraft is kind of a confidence player. He came on yesterday, and there was one moment about probably maybe 10, 15 minutes after he came on where he eventually won a tackle, and the crowd, went up with him, and there was a big roar. And I think if he does start against West Ham and he starts well, then I think we'll see him do it right, because we have seen him improve under Eddie Howe. He's one of the long list of players who've grown, and the performances have definitely improved and gone up a level. So fingers crossed, if he does start, he can show a bit about him, and why he deserves to be part of this Newcastle squad.
Yeah, and I think from memory, he started against Manchester United and actually had a decent game there as well, and obviously he was tested by their forwards. I know they had a poor game on the night, but he has it in him. I think, as I was saying, if he's rarely had a run of games in Newcastle, because for years they've not had an undisputed first choice right back. You've had Murphy playing 7 games, then he comes out. Manquillo plays 7, he comes out, and Kraft comes in. And I think he would benefit from just having that belief, as you say, to know that it's his position for the short term. Just do your best, as it were. And he, as he said again, he's a professional footballer. It's not an amateur being thrown in here. It's just the levels are so high, and the wingers are so good in the Premier League that opposition managers are going to look at that team sheet and think, right, get that left winger on him early doors and see how he gets on.
One good thing from yesterday, obviously Newcastle won, which was an excellent thing. But Dan Burn, you've mentioned him, and he's brought a bit more leadership, and just again he looked assured. It's something that you notice with Kieran Trippier and Matt Targett. They look confident in themselves that they can handle whatever's thrown at them. So yes, they're missing Kieran Trippier, but you would think Dan Burn would probably start against West Ham, and he brings a bit more balance to that back line, and that'll just be a massive plus for Newcastle.
Yeah, I think he's fantastic. I'm not saying anything original there. I think every fan probably thought that. It's just a brilliant story as well. I'd certainly be pretty nervous if I knew all my family were watching me, nearly 20 years after being released. But he played like Trippier, as I was saying earlier, played like he'd been at the club for years. Just the composure on the ball, the clearances he made. He had some great moments with Tyrone Mings where they're going head to head. He ripped his shirt at one point, which was pretty funny. I think he's it's a really big call, because I don't see how dropping Lascelles when he's fit. Cher has been really good for me, so to pick 2 from 3 is a big call for Saturday. But he was really good and rightly named man of the match. I think he just brought that calmness to the back line that hasn't really always been there. And it's not a coincidence lately the way they've been defending. They just look so much stronger at the back now. Those new signings have made such a big difference.
Yeah, 100%. We've got a few comments here. We've got one from Tell Magpie Ross says, terrible luck with injuries. Of course, Callum Wilson's the other big name out. It says the remaining players have to stand taller and we can do this. He's talking about survival there. And that's the thing as well. Like you've said, Kieran, it's a big blow, but it is just one player and you feel the squad, there's a good spirit there. They've won 3 on the bounce. Everyone's positive. And yes, that will be dragged down ever so slightly by this news, but they're a group who will just kick on and they'll be looking ahead to West Ham and hoping to get a win. And they'll just, they'll probably want to do it for Kieran Trippier and kind of say, these 3 points are for you and obviously everyone watching back at home.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's funny. It just had it been a central midfielder who got an injury, Joe Willock would have been a huge miss, but they had obviously Guimaraes to come in. Sean Longstaff's obviously played well when he's come in recently as well. I think it's just the fact it's that one position, along with probably goalkeeper, they could really ill afford an injury like this. And I was just thinking, there's no other right back in world football right now who's as influential as Kieran Trippier. I don't think that's an exaggeration in terms of a brain in the team. He's brought so much to that team. So it will be interesting to see, do they revert back to where they were before he arrived, whereby that's an area they look a bit weak in. It's not a coincidence how wanted to strengthen the full-back department. They were playing Matt Ritchie and Jacob Murphy against Man City only 7 weeks ago, I think. It was an area that really needed strengthening. So will they be adversely affected by Trippier coming out, or will they, as you said, the sum of the parts, the team actually come together and actually, because they've strengthened and got that bit of confidence and belief now, they'll be able to cope without him. So that's the big question. Certainly Saturday, West Ham, that it will have an answer, that there aren't many trickier tests for a right back coming into it to face, really.
Yeah, it's important as well that the players that do play on Saturday against West Ham, it's an opportunity for some of them to find their voice. I think before the January transfer window, in my view, that's what Newcastle were lacking. They were lacking a voice on the pitch, a bit of leadership. And we've seen that with Kieran Trippier. I mean, you in the press box sit really close to the touchline. You can hear him barking away. And then when you watch the Newcastle United content they put on their YouTube channel, you can see he's telling players, instructing players what to do. And that's been really crucial since he's joined. I think it's made a massive difference. We're hoping Dan Burn can do a bit of that. Matt Targett's a bit more of a quiet character. But, the players that do get picked will have to step up and make their voice heard on Saturday.
Yeah, that's the big thing, is that leadership aspect that Trippier brings. As I was saying, the free kicks have been huge, but it is that leadership aspect, having those calm heads who, can keep the team focused. Because we think back to moments, when they went 2-1 up against Southampton, I think it was going back to August. There was only a couple of minutes left of stoppage time, and they couldn't close out that game, which, to be honest, is unforgivable at this level. It's noticeable how they've been able to close out games lately, and that has to continue. And I think there's a leadership group there who made a very conscious effort that it didn't just fall to Lascelles because he wore the armband. You're seeing, even when Fernandes has been injured, he's been a big presence around the training ground. It'll be the same with Trippier, as you alluded to. John Shelby obviously is a key player there. They have enough leaders in there to share the burden around, even without Trippier, even without Callum Wilson, of course, is a big figure on and off the field as well. So that will be really interesting to see how they cope. But there's enough in that dressing room to get them through, say 5-6 games. They can't just rely on a right back and blame it on that when it doesn't go the way. They have enough confidence and spirit and belief now to really build on these results.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to hear now from our chief sports writer, Lee Ryder, who makes the point that Trippier has set the standard, and that's what the rest of the team now have to provide from now on in.
So disappointing news for Newcastle United this morning. Kieran Trippier definitely has broken a bone in his foot and faces a spell on the sidelines, which is, it's just a hammer blow for Newcastle United. You looked at this one and you felt he was a good signing for Newcastle United in January. That's probably the biggest understatement of the season so far, because he has lifted this team up the table almost single-handedly, just with his organisation, his experience, 2 massive goals. And, you know, for Newcastle, this is a blow. But he'll be back. He'll be back at some stage. There's no doubt about that. And Newcastle have one of the quality right backs in Europe in the squad. The big thing for this is that Trippier has, you know, set the standard for Newcastle now. That is what they've got to, you know, achieve every game. Hard work, organisation, all stopping crosses, just making life difficult for the opposition. Everything that they've lacked this season until the turn of the year. So, big blow, but, you know, he's still going to be around. He's still going to be in the background. Who knows, he could be back at some stage this season. And for Newcastle now, they've got to just, you know, bottle that spirit up and take it down to West Ham and look to get the result. And whoever comes in knows the standard now. There's no doubt about that. If it's Emil Kraft, he knows he's got to step up and produce a Trippier-esque display at the London Stadium this weekend.
Yeah, and as we mentioned there, as Lee mentions there, if it is Kraft, whoever comes in, they have some standards to meet, but I'm sure they'll do their best. Just before we let you go, Kieran, just talk to us about the form Newcastle are in. I mean, I think they're 4th in the league table over the last few games, have won 3 on the bounce, and they haven't just won the games; they've deserved to. And against Everton, they dominated, and against Villa, it wasn't the best of games, and at times they were hanging on. So it was a different kind of test, but they passed it. You know, they were resolute. They were back, you know, defending with their backs to the wall. But they held on, which shows you 2 types of this Newcastle United side under Eddie Howe. What have you made of the last 3 games?
Yeah, it's been remarkable, really. I think yesterday was the kind of game they wouldn't have won a few weeks ago. They might even have lost it, to be honest. I think, as you said, you're seeing 2 different faces. And in possession, they were better against Everton a few days ago, but out of possession against Villa, I think they're really solid. They frustrated them. Villa, I know, weren't at their best, but that was as much down to, you know, those midfielders like Joe Willock, Joe Linton. They really took hold of that game, really put them under pressure. And yeah, I think it's been, you didn't necessarily see a new manager bounce in terms of results with Eddie Howe. I think, you know, it took them a while to get that first win, and then after that, it wasn't necessarily lift off, but you can really see the fruits of the work they're doing on the training ground paying off now, the belief that's there, the spirit that's there. The new signings have undoubtedly helped, but I think only 3 of them started yesterday. It's as much down to the levels he's got out of the players who are already at the club that I think has been particularly striking for me. You're seeing Joe Willock the past few weeks, John Shelby, Joe Linton, obviously reborn as a midfielder. You could go on really through the whole team sheet, and it gives them, you know, 4-point cushion at this stage of the season. On paper, it doesn't seem much, but to win games down at the bottom is so hard. You know, do you fancy Watford to win 2 on the bounce at the moment and Newcastle to lose 2 on the bounce? I'm not so sure. Ditto other teams down there. Burnley, for example, it's really, really hard for those teams to win games. So it gives them that cushion, but I think it's crucial that they build on it now. You know, West Ham away, Brentford away, they're not easy games, but if they can get points from those 2, it keeps that momentum going, and that's the most important thing, because it just feels like a bit like the second half of last season. You know, we had that horrible low point at Brighton, but once they started to get up and run in this team, they do tend to go on runs, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah, I think the key word you mentioned there is momentum, and West Ham in their game against Leicester showed they were vulnerable, and Aston Villa did against Leeds. So Newcastle just have to make sure they take advantage of that. And of course, we'll bring you live coverage of that game over on our website on Saturday. And obviously, there's plenty of content to come this week from Kieran and from our chief sports writer Lee as well. So do head over to chroniclelive.co.uk, where we'll bring you all the latest updates on Kieran Trippier and all the reaction from the weekend's game, and look ahead, of course, to that West Ham game. For the meantime, thank you very much for tuning in, and enjoy the rest of your week.